Hi, everyone. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I'm very excited this afternoon to be hosting two of our favorite authors, Elly Griffiths and Clare Mackintosh, both of whom have new books out, and we will hear all about shortly. Elly Griffiths is here to talk about Bleeding Heart Yard, and Clare Mackintosh's latest book is The Last Party. And as I said, we are all big fans of both authors at the store. We have numerous staff members who read both authors, and they come highly, highly, highly recommended. So if you are interested in ordering copies of the books or finding out more about either author, I'm going to put a link in the comments on Facebook and the live chat on YouTube momentarily as soon as the conversation starts. And you can click there. We would appreciate you ordering the books from us if you're so inclined, but definitely find out more information about the authors and their books at the link. Also, we like for these events to be interactive, so don't be shy. If you have any questions, please feel free to, again, put those in the comments in the live chat, and we'll get to those for the second half of the event. Okay, I'm going to start with Elly Griffiths. Hi, Elly. How are you?
Hi, McKenna. It's lovely to be here. I'm really well.
It's lovely to see you. We've done a few of these by now, and it's always one of my favorites to just sit back and listen to you chat with whomever. I'm going to do your brief intro or bio, and then we'll bring on Clare. Elly Griffiths is the author of the Ruth Galloway and Brighton mystery series, as well as the standalone novels The Stranger Diaries, winner of the Edgar Award for Best Novel, and the Postscript Murders. She's the recipient of the CWA Dagger and the Library Award and the Mary Higgins Clark Award. She lives in Brighton, England. And again, thank you so much for being here. We're going to hear about Bleeding Heart Yard today. We also have Clare Mackintosh joining us. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Like I said, both your books and Elly's books are big favorites of ours. So we're happy to see a new one with The Last Party. I'll do your bio as well and then leave you two to chat. Clare Mackintosh is the multi-award-winning author of 4 Sunday Times best-selling novels. Translated into 40 languages, her books have sold more than 2 million copies worldwide, have been the New York Times and international bestsellers, and have spent a combined total of 50 weeks on the Sunday Times bestseller chart. Her most recent novel is Hostage, which is a lie. Obviously, we should have a newer bio. Your most recent novel is Last Party. Mackintosh lives in North Wales with her husband and their 3 children. I'm going to be here. If you have any problems, just say, I wonder if McKenna's here. Otherwise, whenever you're ready for me to come back on for questions, just shout and I will appear. Have fun.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
So
Thanks, McKenna. Wow.
It never stops feeling strange, does it? Hearing yourself introduced like that.
I know. It's yes, it feels very strange. And you sort of think to yourself, oh, really? Oh, is that me? Oh, okay then, yes.
It's
and
nice,
having the right face on is quite difficult.
Oh, yes, yeah. Absolutely. Yes. You don't want to look too smart.
No, hey, look, what have I done? Or you just sort of small smile of, yeah. So have you been to Murder by the Book in person?
No, I haven't, and I would love to. Have you?
Yes, I have. A while ago, though, now. I'd love to go back. It's just a lovely bookshop, and the staff, really love books. Did I just disappear?
You didn't disappear, but I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not getting all of you. You're slightly glitchy, but that might be my end.
Hi. I think
yes,
we might.
I can't quite hear you properly, McKenna.
I think what we might do, I'm putting it in the private chat here. I think what we might do, if you can hear me, okay, is Elly. I think maybe you should step away.
It's a lovely bookshop. I recommend going there.
Excellent, thank you. So I think that maybe Elly should leave. and then come back with the link. I'm going to put that in the private chat really quickly.
Time stop, isn't there? I don't know if we need to.
Okay, Claire.
Hi.
While Ellie gets her, there we go. Hi. You know what? I'm just going to start this off by having you tell us a little bit about The Last Party.
Yes, absolutely. So The Last Party is set in Wales, where I live, and it's set around a fictional lake called Llindrych, or Mirror Lake, where the border between England and Wales runs right through the middle of the lake. So on the Welsh side of the lake is a small rural community, sort of place where everyone knows everyone. And on the English side is a luxury resort of log cabins. And on New Year's Day, when the locals go into the lake for their traditional New Year's Day swim, a body floats through the mist from the English side to the Welsh side. So that kickstarts a cross-border investigation led by Detective Constable Ffion Morgan, who is from the Welsh side of the lake, and she works with Leo Brady from England.
Well, I have to say, I wasn't planning on interviewing, and I have not read The Last Party, but my mom, Brenda, who works at the bookstore, is a huge fan of yours and loved this book, as did Rebecca. So you write primarily, rather than a series, you write standalone psychological suspense, correct?
Yes.
So what...
Why?
Yeah, because we have Elly here who has series, and even Bleeding Heart Yard is in her latest series that are, The Harbinger, but why standalone?
I'm really one of the things I really want to talk to Elly about tonight is the challenges of writing a series, because I'm writing the second one now, and it's really, really hard because I don't know what I'm doing. And yeah, I have always written standalones, and they've always started with a particular concept, a situation, an idea. So, for example, Hostage, set on a long-haul flight. The starting point for that was, what happens if you're on a 20-hour flight? You can't go anywhere. What happens if something horrific is going on there? Whereas The Last Party was different. The Last Party started with a setting. It started with a character. So I knew from the outset that it was just, a little bit different, and that it might just be a series. So I'm hoping Elly's going to give me some top tips.
Well, she is back with us. Let's see. Hi.
Hi. That feels a bit better? Does it sound better?
Well, we can hear you. I think there's still a delay.
Does that sound?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Oh,
So,
good. Well, I was just listening to you chat, actually. Could have stayed there forever.
So Claire, we were just talking about how she writes standalones and how you write a series. And I know she wanted to talk with you about the challenges she's now having writing a series. So I'm going to duck out. If there's still a little bit of a delay, I think we can manage. But if it freezes like it did before, then I'll monitor in the private chat. Okay.
Great. Thank you, McKenna. And
Right.
Elly,
Okay.
because there is this time delay, I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm just going to keep stum and try not to overlap too much, so that it's not difficult for people watching. But I've got so many questions that I want to ask you. But the first thing is, have you got the cover there? Because I've got this arc, which is lovely, but I want to see what the cover looks like.
Because this is the American cover. That's really different. But it's great, isn't it? It looks like, I'm not sure where it is, because Bleeding Heart Yard's a real place. I don't think this is it, but it looks very sort of spooky. One of those spooky London news houses, a bit like 10 Downing Street.
Tell us about the book, first of all, and then tell us where Bleeding Heart Yard is and why, how that became the inspiration.
Oh, great. And I want to talk to you about Last Party, which I loved. So this book is set in London, and it's the third book HCI Harbinger for. So we were talking, I know we want to talk about series and standalones. So I'm just not very good at standalones because the Stranger Diaries, which was the first book to feature Harbinger, was a kind of Gothic, modern Gothic book, and she was the detective who came in to sort of solve these sort of rather strange murders that echoed murders in a Victorian horror ghost story. So I never thought she'd feature again, but here she is. She was in the Postscript Murders, and here she is again. And now she's moved to London. She's got promotion, and her first case is a really high-profile one. It's a prominent politician who's been murdered at his school reunion. And there seems to be some sort of link with a real life place called Bleeding Heart Yard. The politicians received notices calling him Bleeding Heart, which obviously liberal politicians. But there is a London Bridge, and it was the site of a gruesome murder in the 1700s. Where a woman called Elizabeth Hatton went to a ball, as you do, danced with a dark stranger, as you do, and unfortunately was found murdered the next day with her heart on the away from her body, still beating. And some people say that it was the Spanish ambassador, say it was the devil himself. So that is yeah. There's a nice restaurant. I always like to set in place restaurant. But it's not quite spooky enough for the name.
And what was it about Harbinger, do you think, that made her come back? Because this could have been any detective, couldn't it? Why did you want to bring her back?
Well, I really want to talk about this because it's interesting, as I want to talk about Fionn in The Last Party, and how you kind of know that a character is going to come back. And I do remember, this is a tiny bit of a name drop, but I remember when Stranger Diaries came out, Val McDermott sending me a really nice little note about it. And she said, oh, I'm not going to do her voice because it's only Val can do her voice. She said, I think that Harbinger will want to come back in another book. And I thought, oh, really? But she did. I think I suppose she's a kind of complex character. She's from a background that's unlike mine. She's a Punjabi Sikh background, British Indian. She's still living with her family in the first book, in her 30s. She's gay. She's kind of out to them, but this is her chance to be out properly and to be in London and to lead a murder inquiry. So I think, although she's quite acerbic, and I think she kind of has the sort of depth and layers that maybe you need for a character who's going to come back. They don't always have to be nice, do they? But there has to be things that you want to say about them. And I wondered, what about you with the Last Party? Because she just has the most incredible introduction to the case, which I won't give away because it's such a great moment. But what was it about her that made you think, she could be your series character?
It's funny, isn't it? I do think it maybe it's a kind of intangible thing in the same way that, if you meet someone and you think, I really want to be your friend, and you couldn't necessarily describe why, maybe it's because they've got a great sense of humor, maybe it's, because they're kind, but actually sometimes you just click and you think, I really want to hang out with you. And I think that's how it was for me with Fionn. It's how it is when I read series fiction and I think, I really want to hang out with you again as a character. It's someone who is interesting, I suppose, and Fionn is quite prickly. She's not an easy character to like. She's not an easy character to work with. She's fiercely independent. To the point where, she doesn't really work well in a team, and she can be quite, also quite acerbic. But I think I just want to know what she does next. And that's what it boils down to, isn't it? As a reader or as a writer, if you want to know what they do next, then that's your series character. But I've never felt that about any of the other characters that I've written.
But that's really interesting because, before, as you know, before I wrote as Elly Griffiths, I did write standalones under my real name name. You call me Dom. And they were all standalones. And I really liked some of those characters, but I didn't ever see myself writing a series about them. So I think it was Ruth was the first character that I thought, oh, I could write a whole story. There is a long story there, isn't there? And I think it's quite important as well to surround them with, I know friends who have written a series character and then made the mistake of being an orphan with no friends, and then you're kind of stuck with them, because I love sort of Fion's background as well. That's quite important too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Although, I mean, Lee Child's done all right with Reacher, hasn't he?
That's true, actually. Yeah.
But a lot of it comes down to role, I think. You know, Ruth Galloway can carry a series because of her job. So it doesn't always have to be a police officer, you know, but it does have to be somebody whose job will put them into contact with lots of interesting situations. You couldn't just take Elly Griffiths, for example. I couldn't write a series about you, because it would be really unfair as a normal woman to put you through multiple traumas, you know, book after book after book. That there aren't very many cases where normal members of the public, you know, have to do that. So generally speaking, I think, you know, a series protagonist has got to have that kind of role. But I am finding it quite tricky now. The writing the sequels, you have to think about so many things, don't you? You have to think about what you might have revealed in the first book or in the last book and how you're going to deal with that. It's almost like reverse engineering a twist that you can't tell your readers too much because they might not have read the first book. So how do you manage that?
It is really difficult. It is really tricky, because, like you say, you don't want to give too much away. And of course, you have to be aware that each book could be people's first book. So you can't assume they know anything. But then again, you don't want to keep giving. You can't say, oh, she remembered that traumatic time. And you're so right about the character kind of having trauma after trauma. And I've got to say, Ruth has investigated more murders than most archaeologists. But, you know, you can't keep saying, you can't say, oh, she remembered, as you would if I was talking to you about something terrible. I'd say, oh, that time an X murdered Y, wasn't that awful? You can't say that because you would only give it away. And there's only so many times you could say, oh, she remembered that terrible night. I mean, you have to do that a little bit, but not too much. So it's quite coming, you know, out of nowhere, really. And is there anything? Because in the first book, the first Ruth book is The Crossing Places, and I said something like, "Oh, Ruth never wore jeans," and you would be surprised how often that has just come to attack me, because it's sort of shorthand, isn't it? You know, oh, she was just in jeans, you know. Blimey, I said she didn't wear jeans. I've got to say she wears them now. And if anyone asks me at about book 8, because I'm just written book 15, she found a pair that suited her. So is there anything like a little thing you feel you've written Fion into a corner with?
So firstly, I think the jeans thing is totally acceptable that she's changed her mind, because I never wore jeans and totally hated them, and now I live in them. So I'm with Ruth all the way on that. I already feel like I've painted myself into a corner with geography. So I've created an area, fictional area for myself, where I've said very clearly, you know, there was nothing for 45 minutes. And now I'm writing sort of a scene where I just want them to nip to the shop, or I really need, for the purposes of the plot, them to just be able to go very quickly to the police station. But they can't, because it's like a 3-hour round trip and it's going to take half the day. So those sorts of things, I might have, if I'd really thought about a series, I might have planned it better.
To talk about that too, but yes, with me as well, it's the fact that King's Lynn is quite a long way from Norwich, and whenever I'm in Norfolk doing events, and I say any questions, one of them is always going to be, how come she gets so quickly from King's Lynn to Norwich? But then when I was in America once, somebody said, oh, you know, she seems to take a long time to get anywhere, because if anyone knows Norfolk, and I'm guessing there's a single lane traffic, and you can get stuck behind, a horse box or a tractor, and it takes hours. So, our characters are just going to have to spend quite a lot of time on the road, aren't they?
They are, yes. So I want to know about your writing process. And we've talked a little bit about this before when we've met, but I would love to know, when you get the idea for a novel, what then happens and over what period of time?
Okay, well, yes, I love talking about this with other writers, just because we're all so different, and it makes you sort of feel a bit relieved that you're not doing it wrong, because everyone does it differently. So, with me, I have a notebook in which, in fact, I've probably got one here, a little notebook, where I write down. This is a good thing about doing Zooms, isn't it? I write down little ideas in there, and then I used to very sort of sketchily, very low tech. I don't have any sort of writing software or anything like that. Our mutual friend Leslie Thompson is the whiz of spreadsheets. You should see the spreadsheets for her books. But I just, on longhand, would just write down a chapter plan, just a line for each chapter. But about 4 or 5 books ago, Stranger Diaries, so my first standalone, which I think has my most complicated plot, I didn't write anything down, and it kind of worked. I could keep it in my head just by the end of each chapter, just putting a little few notes to myself saying what's coming. And I think it stopped me kind of being too linear, just goes on the beginning and going to the end, made me sort of able to sort of explore different areas. So that's how I work now. I have a vague idea. With the Bleeding Heart Yard, I did know, because it's probably slightly more of a sort of psychological thriller than some of my other books. I did know that the twist in it from the beginning, but some of the others I don't. I'm now I plan down. What about you? Are you a planner?
Yeah, a real planner. I think I approach my books like I would investigate a murder. So I was a police officer, as you know, and I'm very organised anyway. And I
was going to say, you should just say that, make that clear.
Yeah. In fact, I've got my police hat somewhere. Where is it? Behind? Oh, it's sitting behind my my last party. You can't see it. So I start with the 3-act structure. I will shape out a big sort of a beginning, middle, and an end. I will then create a chapter breakdown. So much like you've said you used to do, with a line for each chapter. But before I start writing, I'll expand that. And actually, for the book I'm writing right now, I've never planned to this extent before. But my first draft was effectively a really long outline. So it was a kind of 25,000 word chapter breakdown. So a paragraph or 2 for each chapter, telling me exactly what happened in that chapter. And occasionally, as I'm writing that outline, there's a particular turn of phrase or an atmosphere or just something that I can see playing out in my head. And so I will jot it down there. So it's I used to see it like a plan. And now I think it's kind of my first draft. It's like a really, really skeletal first draft. And what it does is it enables me. So I find outlining a really creative process. I don't find it laborious. It gets me really excited. But it means I don't have to think about description or dialogue. I can just think plot and be really creative with the plot. And then when I move to the writing phase, I'm freed up to be creative with the prose and the dialogue, and I'm not worrying about where the plot goes. But I have changed my process with every single book. So who knows how I'll write the next one.
I love that. I love that you've changed the process, and I have too. And I think it's kind of quite encouraging, isn't it? Because there's no real one way. And I hope this is true, that some books are just much harder to write than others, aren't there? But I sort of hope that doesn't show in the finished book. There are some of the Ruth books I have galloped through like nobody's business. with me, and you're thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? But I hope you can't tell which is which, really. But I find your process really interesting, because with me, I guess, I always say I just do one draft, but of course I do change it as I go along. But it's kind of all there in a big match, you know, the setting and the dialogue and everything like that as I go along, really. So if you looked over my shoulder when I was writing, you would recognise it, because it would appear on the page pretty much like that, I think. But I wanted to ask you about setting, Claire, because The Last Party has this amazing lakeside, which is not only beautiful, but it's just interesting in of the people who live there, and the sort of social hierarchies and farmers coming in. And I quite here because Elly Griffiths, though it's not my real name, was my grandmother's name, and she was. Was that lakeside setting really important for the book?
Yeah, it was. It was the start of the book. So I was saying at the beginning of the event that it was really the lake that inspired it. This is an area that I live in. It's a lake that I swim in, and it was while I was doing the New Year's Day swim that the start of the book came about. So really important, but also because from a kind of a slightly deeper perspective, thematically, the book is very much about opposites and reflections and two halves, splits between communities, the people who have lots of money and the people who don't, the people who are locals and the people who are incomers, even Fionn from Wales and Leo from England. You know, there are lots of examples of where there are opposites, you know, as though you're looking in a mirror. The lake is called Mirror Lake. And so it became really important, not just geographically, but also thematically. And I suppose I played with that a lot. I don't just do one draft. And so in later drafts, I could really sort of play around with the imagery a little bit. And also the community, there are little bits of Welsh in it. It's Fionn lives in a Welsh-speaking area, and it was quite important to me that as an incomer, because I'm English living in Wales, that I represented that properly, and that I wasn't going to offend anyone. And in fact, I hired a sensitivity reader, and I wanted to ask about Harbinder, whether because you said earlier that she was absolutely, you know, outside your own life experience. How comfortable did you feel writing about her, and where did you get your sort of confirmation that you were writing her background accurately?
Well, it is quite a difficult area, isn't it? And you know, you just do want to be as authentic as you can as a writer. Obviously, we make things up and things appear, and in a way, Harbinder did just appear because she was the detective who came in and started solving the case in the Stranger Diaries. But of course, everyone comes somewhere. So I think a little bit of her is of a friend of mine who is from that same Punjabi Sikh background, and she was the first person I turned to really when I'd finished the book. She wasn't kind of a main character, but she had a point of view. She was a point of view character, definitely, in that book. So I asked Harpreet, my friend, if she would, and looking at you know, because obviously, you know, characters, there are similarities there, and in a weird way, I grew up in an Italian family. There were many similarities between Italian and Indian families, you know, the great strength of the family and all the food and all those things. But of course, they're different, and it's a background I don't have. And I felt, you know, very awkward about, I would have felt very awkward about writing in Harbinder's point of view if I hadn't had that. So Harpreet read it and gave me lots of feedback. But actually, the person who was really, really helpful was Harpreet's mom, because she said to me, look, I'm going to show it to my mom because she's first generation immigrant and she will also help with the food. So Balvinder's it was very, very interesting, and it made me realize that there's not only, you know, a different cultural thing, but there's an age thing, isn't there? Different, you know, my grandparents were first generation immigrants from Italy, and it's just very, very different. So I have to say, were really, I wouldn't have had the character of Harbinder, I don't think, without them. Just, looking at it, and I'd done some really stupid things, like I'd given them a dog called Sultan, and Balvinder says, Sikh family would not have a dog called Sultan. Of course, so stupid of me. But then we had a wonderful discussion, dog, which was just brilliant. So those sort of things were for me very enriching. But yeah, we make things up, don't we? But I think you also want to be as authentic as you can, really, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't, we shouldn't be frightened of writing outside our cultural reference. I met a barrister recently, one of the very few Black barristers in the UK, and I was talking to her about Black characters in books, and she said, "Oh, it was really great to see that Leo is Black in The Last Party." And so we were talking about it, and she said, "Would you write a book with a Black character as the lead?" And I said, "Well, I would, but I would have some nervousness about it in case I got it wrong." And she just said, "Oh my word, we just want to see representation. We just want to see ourselves in books. We all get things wrong, and actually you can't represent an entire culture because a culture is made up of so many different people." So yeah, I think absolutely we do our best and we try and get stuff right, but ultimately we are writing fiction. That's our job.
And that's such a good thing to hear, isn't it? I think. And the other thing is that, I don't want to write about an all-white world. It's not the world I live in. That's not the world I want to represent. I don't want the books full of people like me, because it would be a bit dull. So you do want that. You do want to represent, and I do think it's one of the things I've learned, because we're all learning all the time, aren't we? It's really how important representation is. So it's quite important to me that there's a British Indian gay character at the centre of my books, but neither of those are things that I am. So it is. You do hope to get it right, don't you? What about? I've just today had an interview with Peter James and Graham Bartlett talking about police procedure and trying to get that right. and obviously you've said that's your background in the police. I mean, how important is it for you to get that right? How difficult is it now approaching as a writer?
It's really changed over the years. I remember when I wrote I Let You Go, my editor kind of pulling me back a little bit and saying we probably don't need quite as much detail, because I was only sort of 6 months, a year out of the police, and felt a huge obligation to get it absolutely right. And as time has passed, I've become a bit more relaxed. The story is what comes first. And I'm really guided by something that Sophie Hannah said years and years ago, which is that she asks herself not whether something is probable, but whether it's possible. And so, maybe it's not very likely to happen like this, but if it's just about feasible that it can happen, then she'll run with it. So I kind of apply the same test. I've got lots of former colleagues that I speak to. And with The Last Party, I actually ran what we would call in the police a paper feed exercise. So I got a group of my former colleagues together, different ranks, different departments, specialisms, and I fed them pieces of the murder investigation. So I fed them bits of evidence, started off with, here we are by the lake, here's the body, what are you doing now? And then I would give them the post-mortem results, what are you doing now? And it was the most useful thing, because it gave me lines of inquiry that I hadn't thought of, because I've forgotten or because technology's moved on. It tested my murder mechanism, because I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't be guessed too early. It's quite a specific way of killing someone. And it was really good fun as well. So that was really, really good. And it helped me with things like, I was wondering if we should be getting the underwater search team out, for example, to look in the lake for a piece of evidence. But it's really expensive, and I didn't feel it was justified. So I was talking to my colleagues about it, and one of my friends, who is a senior officer, said, "Oh, nowadays we just use the underwater drone. It's really cheap, really quick for this sort of thing." So that was really helpful. But I also I interviewed Lisa Jewell, maybe 18 months ago, and she said she doesn't do any research ever. She's a fiction writer. And you know what? Her books are brilliant. She sells millions and trillions of copies. And so ever since that conversation, I'm kind of channeling Lisa Jewell and really focusing on just writing really good stories and not worrying too much if the police procedure is a little bit shaky.
I love that. I did an event with Lisa. Actually, she's so great, isn't she? And she said that then, and she also said, "Oh, I don't do any planning. I just think, something can happen here." And it's really liberating listening to that. But I think the thing is about Lisa, and all the writers that we love, they're just great characters, isn't it? And it does start with the character. Mick Herron's another one who writes these amazing spy novels, though I'm still not sure that he's not a spy himself. But anyway, he says, I don't do any, because if anyone was a spy, it would be Mick. But he says don't do any research. But it's his characters, isn't it? Jackson Lamb, these kind of monstrously wonderful characters that you stick with. So I think it probably does all come from character. And as you said with the Graham Bartley, who's an ex-police officer, has advised me on sort of police procedure. But he's very good, and he'll say things to me like, "Well, that's not really how you do it, but maybe not some would do it, because it is." And he's just published his first crime novel, first fiction book. It's very good, Bad for Good. And he said his editor was saying, "Got to cut out half these people in the police team," because of course, as you know, and I've learned, it's a massive team, isn't it? And he was in the end just think, well,
and that's why I think that's why I think crime novels, procedural novels, can't be accurate, really, because one person doesn't do all these roles. People work in very specific teams. I was talking to my husband about this today. He's also an ex-police officer, and I was saying that it's really difficult nowadays that police officers, certainly in the UK, work really strongly in specialisms, and so. Whereas years ago, you'd have a detective who might deal with a robbery and a murder and, a people trafficking and all sorts. Now it's all specialist teams. But for the purposes of fiction, we want our detectives to kind of, have a nice variety of cases. And that kind of means, we also want them to be the hero of the hour, not just a little cog in a big team where everyone's going to be doing, different inquiries. So we'll just go with the fiction. I think McKenna's got some questions for us, so maybe we'll call her back.
Time has whizzed on.
Time has whizzed on. Yes, we do have some questions. So I'm also going to give both of you a chance in case there's a delay, so I don't talk over you. So the first one we have is specific to Elly. Do we get to continue seeing Harbinder's family? Will we get to continue seeing Harbinder's family? Kathy Reel is watching, who I'm sure both of you know, and she says she does adore Harbinder's parents. So,
hi, Kathy. Kathy's so lovely and such a huge support for so many crime writers. So it's lovely to think you're there, Kathy. Yes, you will get to see Harbinder's parents. She's moved away, so I mean that's kind of the sort of starting premise of the book is that she's moved away from home. She's got a new job in London. She's got some flatmates. She's living that sort of different life. But of course, she thinks about her parents a lot, and they do. She speaks to them on the phone, and they influence her life. So you do get to see them, maybe not so much in person, but also at the end of the book. I won't get too away. You do get to see her family, and you also get to see the characters that appeared in Postscript Murders. So I'm so glad you like them. I think I said earlier, her family are in a little way based on mine, in that Italian family, a lot of our interactions is around food, and based on how many Italian characters we can see in TV programs. And I remember growing up, we always used to watch like all the credits to see how many Italians are in it. Be like, oh, the chief grip is Armando del Santo, fantastic. And so little aspects like that I do try to bring into her family.
And Kathy had a question for you, Claire. So she wanted to know, and no spoilers here, did you have that huge twist planned out from the beginning in I Let You Go? She says it's still the most stunning twist she's encountered in her reading.
Thank you. Hi, Kathy. Yes, I did. I don't always have the twist from the beginning, but with I Let You Go, I wanted to see whether it was possible to do that thing to a reader, whether or not the reader would kind of, go with it, fall for it. And it turned out that they would.
Okay, so another one for Kathy has a bunch of great questions here. So Kathy is trying to prepare herself for the last Ruth, but she may have to have some therapy. She said, Elly, will you give us a snippet of Ruth and Nelson and Cathbad in the future from time to time as a short story or a Christmas story, or basically, are we really going to be done with them?
Oh, Kathy, don't despair. Don't worry. So I have said that the next Ruth book, which is The Last Remains, which is out in the UK in February, and I think in the States in April, will be the last Ruth book for now. So I have said I've sort of reached a point where I feel that some aspects of Ruth's story should be tied up, and that when that happens, there should be a bit of a pause. So that's how with the Kindle. But I have said that there will be, I think there will be more, but yes, I will write short stories. I'm going to bring out a collection of short stories, I think the year afterwards, and I've already written some of them. So Kathy, you might like this as well, because one of them will be about Justice, a girl called Justice grown up and running a detective agency, and there'll be sort of an early Cathbad's youth, and there'll be what happened, in the war with Max Mephisto. So all those bits of the series that I haven't been able to fit in, but I know in my head, because Claire will agree, I'm sure we all know these things about our characters in our head, but you haven't been able to fit them into the book. So yes, there'll be more. There'll be more about those characters, Kathy, and really don't despair, because I'm pretty sure I'll come back to them at some point.
Oh, wonderful. She just wrote, I love Justice Jones, as do I. So that's great.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, we have another question for Claire. So Kathy said that it's brilliant to get a group like that together and run an investigation by them. There's a little delay in getting to this question, but she wanted to know, do you plan on doing that more?
Yes. Now that I know it worked so well, I mean, it's a bit of a cheat, really, isn't it? It's like having someone kind of, I suppose it's like beta readers, but they're the experts. So I'm kind of, feeding it to them. So yeah, I think I'm going to do it with all my books now. That's going to become my MO as a crime writer.
Great.
It sounds really good fun as well.
It was. Yeah, a bottle of wine and lots of gossip, and yeah, really good fun.
Like a murder mystery party, but with people who really know about murder mysteries.
Yes, exactly that.
Okay, and our last question is for Elly. Did Harbinger surprise you in becoming a main character? Did you envision her as one when you were writing the Stranger Diaries?
Oh, what a great question. Well, I suppose in a way I didn't, because Stranger Diaries is a kind of sort of Gothic, modern Gothic story, and it was really going to be told but by the woman involved with it. A part of the sort of plotting was that she would be writing a diary, and the killer would also be writing in her diaries. That was a sort of central point of it. So I did but when the murder happens, a detective has to come in, and I heard Anne Cleves say this about Vera. You know, she didn't know who was going to come in to solve the murder in the Crow Trap, and it turned out to be Vera. And I didn't really know who was going to solve the murder in Stranger Diaries, but in came Harbinger, and I just loved writing about her. I loved her sort of acerbicness and her, and the way she's about the characters in the story, really. So I did enjoy writing her, but no, I didn't really think she'd be a main character. And I was kind of surprised and so pleased that other people liked it, because sometimes you like a character and nobody else does much. But you know, she people did seem to like her. So she appears again in the Postscript Murders, and she has the point of view again, but she's kind of what's on cast, and she is again in Bleeding Heart Yard, because it's told from 3 points of view, from Cassie, a woman who starts off by saying, is it possible to forget you've committed a murder, and another school friend of hers, Anna Vance, and Harbinder. So she's one of three, but I hadn't thought that she would appear again, or that she'd be so central to this book. But I sort of feel, now this might sound a bit silly, but I sort of feel glad that she's had that chance. I feel she's had a chance to get promotion and go to London, to have sense in her life. It's not giving too much away to say she has some romance in her life in this book. So I'm glad for her.
Excellent. Well, I think we are going to say that we've done it. That's all the questions. It's been lovely to sit back and listen to the two of you talk. Once again, Elly's new book is Bleeding Heart Yard. Clare Mackintosh has The Last Party out. Both highly, highly recommended. You can find more information about them or links to order in the comments. Thanks to everyone watching, and thanks especially to the two lovely ladies who've joined us this afternoon. It's been a real treat. Both of you have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll see you in person for the next ones.
Hope so. Thank you so much, McKenna. Thank you, Elly. Lovely to see you.
Thanks, McKenna. Thanks, Claire. Lovely to talk to you. And if you buy our books, buy them from Good.
Thank you. We appreciate that very much. I'm going to sign us off now. Everyone have a lovely evening.